Please. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure, really my pleasure, to welcome you to this event, the first of the lecture series organized by the Dean's Advisory Council of the CSULB College of Engineering. We will continue these lecture series almost one per semester, two per year, and I hope you will continue to join us for future events as well. This is the topic is important for us because we are committed to be a force for regional transformation and being a reasonable partner in the national agenda for environmental concerns. Earlier today, we had the inaugural meeting of the National Research Center for Green Composite Technologies. This is a very appropriate research center for the College of Engineering because as we build, or we try to build, stronger and more durable composite materials, we have to think about what we will do with these after the lifetime object that uses them. More than 12 companies and representatives from industry, civic, and government organizations were present, and I'm very pleased with the progress that was made today. Our campus has many initiatives on alternative energy, and in this initiative, for example, on the rooftop of one of my buildings, we have 170 solar panels covering about 4,000 square feet of space. This is one of many initiatives that the university has embarked on under the leadership of our president. And with that, I'm going to invite President F. King Alexander to come and formally welcome you to this event.
I also would like to thank you all for coming. This is a big week for us. This is homecoming week. Throughout this week, we kicked it off last Sunday and we'll be continuing throughout Saturday night. So we hope that many of you will come and partake in many of the events that will go on tomorrow and throughout Saturday. This topic, as you can see, is a pretty important topic to not just us, not just engineering, but the whole world. And we rely very heavily on our engineering students, our engineering faculty, our industry leaders, our advisory council, to direct us in the to point us in the right directions, so that we as a university can help solve these problems, and we can do it jointly and collaboratively with our professionals in the field, with our leaders in the field. And we do believe that as a university that produces over and graduates over 500 engineers a year, we do have a great role and a great stake in solving many of these new issues, many of these emerging issues, many of these evolving issues. So as a public university that takes its engineering mission very, very seriously, whether we have a good economy, good budget, or bad budget, I can't think of a more relevant topic for our College of Engineering to address. I can't think of a more relevant panel to begin helping us think through these decisions and think through these possible solutions that I know engineers are generally the ones charged more than anybody else with generating and solution getting and solution solving. So thank you all for coming to our campus. Welcome back for many of you that are alums, our students that are here today. We hope you gain something from this. We hope that maybe it triggers something that you can work in your classes and work alongside of our great faculty with. And know that our commitment to engineering is only going to get bigger, better, and stronger throughout the coming years and coming decades, because it is one of the most important fields, and perhaps when you look at the type of issues that we're all going to address in an interdisciplinary way, we couldn't be tackling a bigger issue with a more important field of study, which is our school, our college, great College of Engineering, and our faculty and staff that reside within that college. But we wouldn't be able to do it without the industry leaders that have graduated from our campus and the others who are coming to work with our faculty, to work in our laboratories, and to work closely with our students to shape the next generation of leaders in engineering. So thank you all very much for coming, and we look forward to the interaction with you, many of you throughout the coming years, as well as the amount that we have to share and learn from each other together throughout these important challenges that we all face, not only in Southern California, but nationally and internationally. Thank you all for coming, and go Beach.
Thank you, King. As I mentioned, these lecture series are organized by the Dean's Advisory Council of the College of Engineering. Many of the members are present here, and we thank you for your participation and leadership. A subcommittee of the Council organized this event, and I would like to recognize the members of the subcommittee. Please stand up as I read your name. Susan Porter-Neal, Barbara Barkin, Michael Nigley, and Jalal Trabzadeh. Thank you very much. We're grateful for your hard work. The event is made possible by the sponsorship of many of our friends. The list includes Applied Medical, Sempra Energy Utilities, Pacific Gas and Electric, the Port of Long Beach, RBF Consulting, Fort Designs, and Technolink Association. And with that, let's go to the main event, and it is my pleasure to introduce the moderator for the panel today, Mr. Mike Nigley. He is the COO, Chief Operating Officer of Sempra Energy Utilities. He has been in that position since 2006. From 2000 to 2006, he was the president of Sempra Generation, and he was responsible for the operation and maintenance of merchant power plants and energy infrastructure throughout North America. He has been a consultant and has provided expert testimony on electric and utility matters before numerous legislative committees, public service commissions, and city councils at the federal, state, and local levels. We are very proud. He is an alumnus of California State University, Long Beach, and he also holds a master's degree from San Diego State University. Michael?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming and joining us today. Everybody's got a name tag. Some of you who are alumni, it's got a little number on here. Can anybody go lower than 71? Nobody lower? Okay, so I'm the oldest one here, I guess. Now that we've established that. So thank you. I'd like to thank Dean Golshani for having the vision and leadership to help us put this series together, and every member of the Advisory Council for their enthusiastic embracing of this series. The first of many, we hope, and the first that touches on a very, very important subject, that being of sustainability of our planet. And when you think of it, this is actually one of the more important issues of our time. Our ability to successfully impact the sustainability of our planet will reverberate throughout our society for tens, hundreds, or maybe thousands of years, depending on how well we do it. But right now, there's no global consensus, national or regional consensus, on how we should do this, where we should prioritize our efforts, where we should start, and how much we should spend on sustainability. And also, once we do commit those kinds of resources to a sustainable program of any kind, there will be winners and losers, not only here in California, but around the United States and throughout the globe. And we have to be cognizant of that as we live in a global society and as we push forward on our sustainability initiatives. We have a great panel today, distinguished experts. We want to get on to hearing their perspectives and what they are doing with respect to sustainability and how the playing field is shaping up for them in their areas. We're going to set the stage for this. We're going to tell you about what's going on in a couple of companies and give you some really tough questions to think about. And at the end of all this, I want you to be giving this panel questions. So when we end today, we're going to have a Q&A session that will be open to everybody that's here tonight. Our first speaker is Nancy McFadden, who is Senior Vice President and the Senior Advisor to the Chairman of the Board and CEO of Pacific Gas and Electric Company. As the Senior Vice President and Senior Advisor, she speaks on public policy. She impacts political, legislative, and regulatory issues for her company and helps to shape her company's business strategy. Nancy, in her career, has been in some places of import. She's been Deputy Chief of Staff for former Governor Gray Davis. She was Deputy Chief of Staff for Vice President Al Gore and also served as General Counsel for the U.S. Department of Transportation. She holds a BA from San Jose State University and a JD degree from the University of Virginia. And I'll tell you, I've known Nancy and I know the people she's dealt with in Sacramento. When Nancy McFadden speaks, people listen. Nancy McFadden.
Thank you so much, Mike, and President Alexander, Dean, and distinguished guests, and most of all, the students who are here, because I think that's what's so terrific about this program, is bringing together people from the community, people from the business community, distinguished alumni, and faculty, and students. And I'm honored to be on a panel with Mike and Matt and Brad, who are deep thinkers about these issues. I don't consider myself a deep thinker, and I'm going to distinguish myself as not being an engineer because I think I'm not going to use my slides, or if I do, I'll only use one. So, you know, I'm a lawyer and not an engineer because I'm going to talk and not have slides. I actually am very glad to be back here. I have not been to CSU Long Beach in a very long time. When I was in college, one of my jobs was to be an advocate for students. And I used to come to Long Beach and go to the chancellor's office and go to Board of Trustees meetings all the time. And one of my compadres in that was somebody who was student body president here at Long Beach State, who now is your state senator, Jenny Orpaz, who would always be over there troublemaking. And now she's in the state senate and I'm still troublemaking. In any case, sustainability. It is I'm sorry about that. I don't know what I'm doing. If I'm doing something, let's see. Again, the non-engineer. I can't quite figure out why she's causing the feedback. Sustainability. Should I try again? Okay, there, that sounds better. Something happened. Okay, let's keep our fingers crossed. Sustainability is one of those terms that, especially now, we see a lot, but it's not uniformly defined. Nobody can really actually give a precise definition to what it is, and I think you'll probably hear that from our panel. To us at PG&E, it means going beyond what you're required to do. It means making smart investments today that you recognize are going to reap benefits in the future, in the road ahead. Not just environmental benefits, but social benefits and ultimately financial benefits. And it's a term that has really come to mean a lot more than the environment. To us, being a sustainable company is about environmental responsibility, but it's also about our employees, it's about our customers, it's about the financial health of our company. And we see it all interrelated. We think that there's really a triple bottom line to sustainability, and that's achieving balance between people, the planet, and profit. To us, sustainability really is a journey. It's something that we're developing along the way. It's not a single destination. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how PG&E views sustainability and talk about some of the issues that in the energy sector we're facing and we think are fundamental to sustainability. PG&E is one utility that's tackling these issues, but really all three utilities in California are leaders on these issues and are tackling these issues in what I would say is a sustainable way. When we talk about PG&E's journey for sustainability, and really California's journey in the energy sector, we really start about 30 years ago. When the utilities in California joined together and said there's got to be a different way to deal with energy and to separate profit from energy consumption. Because 30 years ago in California, policymakers and energy companies and others came together and said, saving energy, being efficient about the use of energy, is as important as creating and delivering energy. It was really a landmark thing that happened in California. And it's something that really is in many ways the foundation of sustainability for us here in California, and should be the foundation for a nation and even the world. So 30 years ago, we began on this sustainability journey, and we didn't call it sustainability. We didn't know what sustainability was then, but a very, very important step. We also started to do things at PG&E, like putting out an annual environmental report. Now, it's a more comprehensive report. It's called our Corporate Responsibility Report. You see that in businesses across the world now. Again, you're going to see, I believe, a shift from calling corporate responsibility reports corporate sustainability reports in the future, and you're starting to see that. We at PG&E also look at our sustainability agenda as not just the environmental milestones that we've met, and we certainly have had a number at our company, but also corporate governance milestones, being transparent in terms of our corporate governance, adopting safety as a fundamental and really our #1 value in our company, valuing the communities that we serve and developing community partnerships, engaging our employees and valuing diversity, and really listening and trying to respond to our customers. We view that all as sustainability and not just environmentalism and not just the battle about climate change. Yet, really, that's where the center of our focus on sustainability is. And as I said, it starts with energy efficiency for us. We really think that energy efficiency is the fastest and cheapest way to reduce greenhouse gases. It's the #1 fuel in our view. It really is the way that we are going to be able to achieve what we need to do to reduce greenhouse gases. And it's more important than any other single thing we can do. It's not as sexy as solar panels or as electric vehicles, but it really should be the heart and soul of our efforts to reduce greenhouse gases and to foster a sustainable planet. If other states were doing what California has done on energy efficiency, McKinsey & Company projected that the United States would have been able to meet its Kyoto goals in terms of greenhouse gas reductions about 2 years ago. And let me kind of paint a picture for you without using a slide. I think I could do it by just painting a picture of how much of a leader California has been and the 3 utilities in California have been on energy efficiency. And that is, over the last 30 years, the California's energy usage per capita has remained absolutely flat. Our per capita usage has not gone up. In the United States as a whole, it's gone up by 50%. That shows what energy efficiency has done here in the state of California, and we need to do more the rest of the United States. A sustainability platform in California has got to be more than impacting California. It's got to be shipping our message about energy efficiency to the other states and around the world. Another important element beyond energy efficiency for us in our sustainable platform is the use of renewable energy. The Dean talked about it, Mike talked about it, and certainly in California, there's much attention on renewable energy. And when we talk about renewables, we mean everything from biomass to wind, small hydropower, geothermal, of course solar. At PG&E, we're big fans of biogas from all the cows in the Central Valley. We also are trying to see if we can do something with wave power as another form of renewable energy. And some of you may have heard that we've even contracted with a company that believes that we can use satellites to get solar energy out of space and have a new frontier for renewable energy. All of those different forms of renewable energy are things that the utilities in California are pursuing in different ways. And we really believe that we've got to pursue all of them, that there is no one silver bullet, but we've got to pursue all forms of renewable energy to see what package of renewable energy technologies is going to work for us in the future. In California, as you might know, we have a renewable portfolio standard, which is that we need to produce and deliver 20% of our portfolio from renewable energy, the investor-owned utilities, the three investor-owned utilities, Sempra, Pacific Gas and Electric, and Southern California Edison. And that requirement is to do so by 2010, right around the corner. But because California is a leader and is always pushing the bounds, we're not going to stop at 2010 with 20%. The governor recently signed an executive order, and the legislature worked very hard in the last legislative session, and in fact passed legislation that calls for 33% of our portfolio to be renewable energy by 2020. This is going to be a very challenging mark to hit. Renewable energy is certainly something that we all believe in and we know we need to have in our portfolio in order to get a reduction in greenhouse gases that we need. But we've got a lot of challenges around the corner to be able to permit and site and develop the technologies that we need to really be able to deliver those electrons from renewable energy to our customers. But it's a challenge that I know California is willing to take on, and we are actually confident that we're making good progress to meet those very, very ambitious goals. And in fact, we believe that we need to in order to be able to do what we need to do to reduce greenhouse gases. Another element to sustainability is how we look at electric vehicles. And from our perspective at PG&E, we say electric vehicles are coming, they're right around the corner, and California, particularly actually from what all the prognosticators say, Northern California is going to be the center of the market, at least in the initial years for electric vehicles. A lot of challenges out there in terms of how do we make sure that we actually have an idea of how electric vehicles are going to impact the electric grid. How do we make sure that we've got the infrastructure to be able to handle plug-in electric vehicles? And yet, with those kinds of questions and challenges, we really believe that electric vehicles, both from energy usage, from security in terms of foreign security, from reducing our usage of fossil fuels, that electric vehicles are going to be a large part of our future. And it's incumbent upon every electric utility to be able to look out into the future in a sustainable way and figure out how we're going to meet that future and be able to handle electric vehicles. Now, one main way that we're going to be able to do that is to focus on fourth element, which is smart grid. We hear that a lot. It's sort of a term like sustainability, where everybody defines it in a slightly different way. But smart grid is something that we can't really buy today from vendors and just install tomorrow. It's like the internet. It's going to be built over years. PG&E and Sempra, Southern California Edison are all starting by installing smart meters in our customers' homes. But the smart grid will really eventually be something that's going to be essential to the low-carbon energy sector. It's going to be able to integrate all the renewable energy that we're going to be bringing online. It's going to be able to increase and expand customer knowledge and therefore customer choice about how they use energy. And it's ultimately going to lead to a more efficient delivery of electricity and smarter and lower energy usage. As I said, the smart meters are the foundation for the smart grid. We at PG&E have installed more than 3.5 million smart meters to date. It's the nation's largest deployment of advanced metering infrastructure. Again, California in the lead, the nation and the world need to follow. Our goal is to install approximately 10 million smart meters by mid-2012. And over time, we think these smart meters leading to a smart grid will enable a more sustainable energy future, including automated home energy management, smart charging for electric vehicles, increased deployment of distributed generation and storage, and greater adoption of demand-side management strategies. Smart grid, absolutely essential to our sustainability platform and the future of the energy sector if the energy sector is really going to do what it needs to do to reduce greenhouse gases. And let me end with a final element, and that is climate change policy, central to our sustainability agenda. As most of you probably know, here in California, we led the nation again by passing a landmark Global Warming Act, AB 32, that our regulatory body in Sacramento, the California Air Resources Board, is in the process of implementing that will require us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels by 2020 and to continue on and reduce 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. Ambitious targets, but California is already up and running to try to figure out the way in which we as an economy are going to be able to meet those targets. As you also probably know, in Washington, a lot of focus besides healthcare on climate change. We're very involved in what's going on in Washington at PG&E. A couple of years ago, we got together with about 24 other companies and several top environmental groups to call for action on climate change and call for our Congress to institute mandatory caps on emissions. A couple of years ago, that was sort of pioneering, that companies, including an electric utility, would be calling for caps on greenhouse emissions. These days, no one bats an eye when the president and top leaders talk about seriously reinventing our energy infrastructure and our system. And they're weighing now what the federal government is going to do on climate change. Policymakers are weighing the costs of action versus inaction when it comes to climate change, U.S. leadership versus a global agreement, and an economy-wide comprehensive cap-and-trade bill versus incremental changes in energy policy. A lot of big questions, but in our mind, a sustainable future has got to have a federal policy on climate change that includes hard caps on emissions. And we can get into, in the questions and answers, details about what's going on at the state and federal level on climate change if you're interested. But I want to end with kind of painting a picture of what, in our mind as an electric utility, we think sustainability means to an individual. And so I'm going to just try to paint one scenario. This is a vision that could or could not happen, but it's one vision. Let's try to imagine 10 to 15 years from now, so year 2020 or so. And when you leave the distinguished lecture series of that evening, you go down to the parking garage where your plug-in hybrid has been connected, and maybe you've been at school all day, so it's been connected to the grid all day. And this morning, you knew that you had more energy in the battery than you would need to get home. So you told your car to sell the extra back to your electric utility when the electric utility needed it most during the peak hours of the day. When you get home, you pull into your driveway and you plug in your car again. It starts talking to your home area network, which then powers up the high efficiency lights in the house for you. Or if you didn't want your car to do it, you actually programmed your cell phone before you arrived home. So those energy efficiency lights came on. And because the smart meter in your house is talking to the grid continuously, it knows that the power is still a bit too pricey at the hour in which you arrived home to begin recharging your car. So it's going to wait until the price is right, and you've selected the price when you want to start charging, and probably well after your sleep, and then it will start charging your car. And by the way, it will be taking advantage of things like wind power, which actually flow at night, so that we can be using a renewable energy that we can't take advantage during our peak hours. It's been warm during the day, so your home area network also begins bringing the temperature to a comfortable level in your home. And earlier that afternoon, even though our solar power facilities were producing ample amounts of energy, PG&E was remotely recycling your air conditioning on and off to save power and to save you money. If you want to go online, you can see exactly how much energy you're using at any moment of the day or night and how much it's costing you. You might even be able to decide that you want to run your dishwasher at a certain time, and again, with your cell phone, program it so that you can turn on your dishwasher from wherever you are, or turn on and off your air conditioning or your dishwasher, or check to see how much energy your kids are using by watching television and using their computers. If you've one of the millions of Californians that are using energy more intelligently, we've probably already hit our greenhouse gas goals of reducing to 1990 levels by 2020. So very importantly, the key isn't any one of the technologies that I mentioned. It's the seamless integration of them all together. And so for us at PG&E, sustainability really is about integration. Integration of goals, things like fighting global warming, being smart about our energy usage, being smart kind about how we treat our employees and customers, being smart and simple about what the goals are for our company, and still being able to make a profit. I'm not sure if the exact version of the scenario I painted comes true, but by thinking in integrated, holistic terms, by keeping customers in focus, employees in focus, and taking on the climate challenge of our day, some version of that scenario will be a sustainable future in our view. Thanks very much.
Technology change out. Okay, Nancy McFadden. Thank you very much, Nancy. One of the things that's interesting from Nancy's talk is our lives are not going to be the same with 33% renewables, electric vehicles, and new sound. Okay, got better. All right. Or the smart grid. And I think just a quick factoid for you. If you wanted to power, maybe half of the city of Long Beach, today you could do it on conventional power plants, natural gas fired. In an area of about 20 acres, you could have a 500 megawatt power plant. How many acres do you need if you're using solar panels? 3,500. So we got a lot of land to find in Southern California and a lot of places to put those solar panels. And that's one of the big challenges we have as well. So onward with our discussion. Our next speaker is Matt Kestya. Matt is the Chief Technology Officer from Microsoft here in the Southwest District. He's centered right here in Irvine. And Matt actually runs something called the Envisioning Center out of their Irvine offices. They have a number of development suites, architectural design labs, and a fully loaded data center at that location. Matt has spent at least 11 years in information technology, focusing on a lot of secure Okay, try that again. Secure infrastructure and operations. He's a member of Microsoft's Security Content Review Board, and has actually participated with the United States Secret Service Chicago Electronics Crimes Task Force and the Information Systems Security Association. He knows a lot about making sure that we're secure, and I think he knows a lot about sustainability here at the Microsoft Corporation. Matt Kestya.
Thank you. So I appreciate that introduction. I love the vision that Nancy put together because it ties in so well with what we're thinking about in Microsoft and how we're going to do it. So today I'm going to talk to you really about three main areas of focus for us. That's the area of sustainable practices and stewardship that Microsoft's going to provide. We're going to talk about how technology and software in particular can help us address these technology problems positively. And we're also going to look at partnership and global impact because no company can do it alone. Like Nancy said, right? It's going to take everybody focused on this problem to solve it. It's just a fact. We, as engineers, we believe that you are the future of this. Right? We need to come up with solutions and solutions. There are really three strategies that we're going to address at Microsoft. First strategy is reduction. Right? How do we reduce carbon emissions? How do we reduce our consumption? How do we reduce waste? Second one is management. So we believe you cannot manage what you cannot monitor. Right? You have to have metrics. You have to understand what it is you're trying to solve, the problem you're trying to solve. You need to have a base point of that analysis. You need to have that insight into what's happening with the climate. And then be able to react to that and see what changes you've actually caused. Because you can cause some unforeseen changes if you're not careful. And finally, rethinking business practices. So pretty much back to what Nancy said, right? The vision is different today, right, than it is going to be tomorrow. People are going to work differently. They're going to live differently. And I'll tell you, with the recession that hit recently, we've seen that in businesses around the world. Right? We've seen businesses that cut back travel before they thought they couldn't do that. Now they're doing things online. They're having live meetings, unified communications, voice and video. All of that's producing what they need to do for carbon. So we're going to go on a little bit. And I'm going to talk, where's the thing here? I'm going to talk why it's important, right? So for Microsoft, we touch 1 billion customers, right? It's important to us as a corporation, right, right? That we have corporate responsibility, and that we're doing everything we can for the environment. But also, we know that our customers are interested in this. We know that our customers, the world, is interested in this. We know that our government is investing billions of dollars in this, and it's a very high topic for everybody. There's also people that we talk to, or I talk to on a daily basis, that say, you know what, what's 2 degrees? What happens if it goes up 2 degrees? It's not a big deal. You know, science is painting a gloom and gloom picture. I don't really believe that myself. I think we really do have to react. So I'm going to share a short story with you. The picture in the upper quadrant there is of Delhi, India. And I was in Delhi about 4 years ago. So when I went to Delhi, I had no idea about the environment there. I was going to visit a company called Infosys and also Microsoft campus. And the country is one of parallels. When I went to the Infosys campus, beautiful, pristine lawns, gated, like a gated community. Everyone there dressed in suits and ties. When you think about 1 billion people in that country, they're all consumers of energy that burn fossil fuels for heat and cooking. You can see by the picture what happens. Right? That's carbon emissions, that's smoke, that's smog. The picture down there is an older picture of Los Angeles. Those pictures aren't too different. We put practices in place to help address that. You can still see sometimes when there's the fires, or when it's a hot day and the wind blows in, you can see that smog build up again. Right? So the people from around here can see that. You can feel it, you get the aspergillus. We know those are problems. Other pieces that we hear about, right? The melting of the glaciers, ice shelves falling into the ocean. These are things that are really happening. So what does it matter when temperature goes up 1 or 2 degrees? A lot. If you're a chemist, there's a concept called going into solution. Going into solution is when you mix 2 components together and a reaction happens. Think vinegar and baking soda. Right? So what happens when you increase something above 32 degrees? Right? And there's ice there. It melts. It's going to happen. If you keep it below 32 degrees, it's going to remain frozen. So the issues and opportunities. The first issue we have is energy demands. Energy consumption is going up, without a doubt. If you look in the 1950s, early 50s, we had about 300 heavy users of electrical energy. About 300 million, heavy users of electrical energy. Look at today, it's about 1 billion. Currently today, about 2 billion people don't even have access to regular electricity. So imagine what happens as they come onto the system. And they need to, right? They need to do that to better their lives. We look at carbon emissions. We see that cities, about 2% of the footprint on the Earth. But carbon emissions, 75% of those carbon emissions are generated from those cities. If we look back in the prior to the Industrial Revolution, we had about 280 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. If you look at today, it's about 390 parts per million. And projections show, and projections can always lie, right? You have to go somewhere, you have to point to something. They show it being about 450 parts per million to 500 parts per million over the next couple decades. What does that do for global impact? Okay. It does what we've seen. It causes glaciers to melt. It causes acidity to go into the atmosphere. It causes water in the ocean to become so acid that it can't calcify coral reefs. Plants and animals die. These are all the doom and gloom pieces, but we believe we can change that. We believe what is going to help us change that is our software solutions. That's really what I'm going to talk to you about. So we're committed to using software and technology to improve the environment and economy. And we're going to start talking a little bit about what Microsoft's doing itself as a corporate citizen. And then I'm going to dive deeper into exactly what technologies we're doing. Okay. So at Microsoft, we have 92,000 employees. We have about 1 billion customers. We have about 425,000 partners around the world. What we're doing internally at Microsoft is a few things. First, with those 92,000 employees, we have campuses around the globe. We're the first enterprise in the US to be certified by the Green Restaurant Certification Program. So you think Microsoft certified by the Green Restaurant Certification Program. Why is that? We decided to go green in our cafeterias. We reduced consumption by 50% by using combustibles. We take the grease from our fryers, and we actually reprocess that to biodiesel. We use that biodiesel to run the trucking system that runs between our campus buildings. We have a system set up that runs throughout the Seattle area It's a bus system that will take people onto campus and back home. It has wireless provided so they can work while they commute. We reduce about 20,000 pounds of carbon per day. It's about 5.5 million pounds of carbon per year. We have hybrid shuttles on campus that take people from building to building, so the inter-campus pieces. These are all pieces that we thought about just so we could have responsibility towards our environment. There's some other interesting things. We began rethinking how we did business. So when someone talks about a data center as an enterprise customer or business, they're normally talking about 100 or 1,000 servers. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of servers. We're talking about many data centers around the world. Those data centers consume large volumes of electricity. So we have to rethink, what is the cost of that? What does that do to the environment? So one of the things we did is we said, well, how do we make them more efficient? Well, the first thing we did, we placed the data center in Quincy, Washington. So Quincy, Washington, the entire facility is run on hydroelectric power. So everything's renewable. We said, you know what, let's go farther. How far can we take this? Well, we realized that power, the biggest power consumption in a data center is the HVAC, right? The heating and air conditioning, the environmentals. How do you keep the right level of humidity? So we started looking and saying, well, how can we get rid of that? Right? How can we just completely get rid of it? We found a place in Ireland that has the perfect temperature for us, the right humidity. Right? So we took and built a facility there with no air conditioning, no environmentals. We just opened up the walls and vented. Completely reduced it. 50% power consumption reduction from when we built a data center 3 years ago. We're going even more extreme. So we're looking at how we take those hundreds of thousands of computers, how we make them more efficient. We've produced a technology called virtualization. So today, a normal server in most companies and probably on campus runs at about 10% utilization. But you need that. You need that separation so that this software can run efficiently. But if you virtualize that, you can take those 10 machines and consolidate them down to one with 10 virtual machines. You basically reduce your energy footprint by 9 times. These are all things that we're working on. You're going to see that first line where you say reduce the 2% of software-driven devices, the energy consumption. So when we did our studies, we said that of all the energy consumption, of that 100%, only 2% was consumed by software-driven devices. Things like your mobile phones, your laptops, in the future, your cars. Okay? How can we address that and reduce that consumption? So our latest operating systems will reduce energy consumption by 15% right off the bat, just by having standard power management in. That's without changing any of the hardware that you have today. So you can upgrade from your existing operating system to a new operating system with 15% reduction. Okay? Those are big deals. Those are what we're thinking about. But then what happens for the other 98%? This is to Nancy's vision. This is where we see ourselves going. We see a city as a biological being. We need to monitor that. We need to see how energy is consumed. We need to make it smart, because that's what software does. Software builds in elements of logic. And it can do things like, if someone's not in the room, shut off the lights. If the temperature goes down, or it's a certain point in time the sun goes down, turn the heat down. The things that, exactly what we're talking about. Or an air conditioning unit that's inefficient, call the service repairman, shut it down. There's all these different pieces that you do. So that's what we think we can impact that other 98%. And then partner with industry-leading organizations and government. So, the European environmental agencies, partnering with them. The Clinton Foundation Climate Committee, partnering with them. So all of the major pieces we're partnering with and seeing how we can help address it. We talked about smart grid in the data centers. We're on that, we're partnering. And then lead by example, like we explained before. The 3 major pieces, right? Reduce, manage, and rethink. I'm going to cover 2 more things that we're doing. Project 2 Degrees is a project that we're working on with the United Nations. We go and we help cities track their energy consumption. So back to this idea of being a biological being and monitoring it, fixing it, repairing it. Cities consume electricity in their buildings. They consume power and emit carbon emissions through their vehicles, and also through the buildings. They have waste produced by people that are operating in action. And you can monitor all of this, and you can see where it's being spent, and then you can make changes. That's what that project's about, giving guidance and changes across the world so that you can impact the environment. And as you make those changes, you can get direct feedback and understand what that change just caused. Right? Did it help you? Did it not help you? We've already talked about the software. The management piece is the idea of business intelligence, gaining insight, and sharing that insight from everybody that's down at the ground level, the engineers, the people producing everything, all the way up to the executives, the U.S. government, the president, so they can see what's happening. We're working on a project right now with the United Nations that tracks water and air quality. It does it online. You can see it based on maps, three-dimensional. You can zoom in and you can look at a lake and say, how clean is that lake? You can see the air traffic moving and say, where's the smog coming from? How are the winds blowing that? And then finally, rethinking. This is really where I think the biggest impact is going to be. And this is what you need to be doing as engineers. Right? You need to rethink about these problems. These problems are solvable. It's in our hands. So if we're traveling too much, how do we eliminate that? If we're producing too much waste, what do we need to do from a technology standpoint to eliminate that? If we're consuming too much electricity, how do we improve? How do we consume less? And better yet, how do we produce more electricity than we can consume in a way that's environmentally sustainable and healthy for everybody? So I talked mainly about those three primary areas: sustainable practices and our stewardship, leveraging technology for a positive impact, and then partnering for a global impact. And also the three pieces, if you remember nothing else: reduce, manage, and rethink what we're doing. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Can't wait to hear your questions on the panel.
Matt Kestian, visionary thinking, visionary changes in Microsoft. Thank you, Matt. I'm particularly interested in building facilities with no AC. That's a very unique item, and having a green restaurant where I can eat more fries and power more buses. So I think these all work together for me. We have our third speaker today is Dr. Brad Allenby. He is the Lincoln Professor of Engineering and Ethics. He's a professor of civil, environmental, and sustainable engineering at Arizona State University. Dr. Allenby's particular areas of expertise include earth systems engineering and management, sustainable engineering, and science and technology policy. He's a co-author of a recently published book entitled Industrial Ecology and Sustainable Engineering. He holds a BA degree from Yale University, a law degree from University of Virginia, a master's in economics from Virginia, a master's in environmental science from Rutgers, and a PhD in environmental science from Rutgers. So between his studies, he's here to speak to us and to distinguish lectures. Dr. Brad Allenby.
So I am told I am able to walk with these critters. This one's not going to work. I'll try that. Pull that one straight out. I don't think I want to pull that one straight out. All right. So what I want to do is I want to begin by referencing Heidegger. And I want to do that for a couple of reasons. The first is, this is probably the only engineering presentation in your entire life that will ever begin by referencing a German metaphysician. The second is that these are probably the two sentences that Heidegger ever wrote that can be understood without the use of powerful pharmaceuticals, which remain illegal in the state of Arizona. But I understand you're working on that here. The third is, he's right. Particularly the last part. The flight into tradition out of a combination of humility and presumption can bring about nothing in itself other than self-deception and blindness in relation to the historical moment. My argument will be, in all of 10 or 15 minutes, that in fact that's exactly what we're doing and that's exactly where we are, and that as yet we have failed to even engage with sustainability, much less think about it as deeply and as seriously as we need to. So, sustainability. A highly normative scenario including requirements for egalitarianism within and among generations and redistribution of wealth. Let me ask a question. How many people here, with the exception of Nancy, have heard of the President's Council on Sustainable Development? Okay, that was a major policy initiative during the Clinton administration. They had meetings all around the country. They published many, many books. Many trees died to bring you that message. They had a bang-up conference to finalize their work in Detroit. 3,000 or 4,000 people attended. And this is Detroit, mind you. And it was a huge brouhaha. And yet, when I ask my students, I get the same response I got from this audience. Nobody's heard of them. Why did the work of that committee, much of which was technically very good, die the way it did? That was not that long ago. And the answer is that a lot of people fail to understand that you are dealing with a very different kind of political philosophy in this country than you are in the countries where sustainable development was developed as an idea and was first proposed and initially rolled out. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do sustainability in the United States, but it does mean that if you're going to do it, you need to figure out what you're going to say to the libertarian Arizona rancher when you're trying to convince him to back your initiatives. Part of the problem that we have with sustainability is that we have tried to hide the normative aspect, the redistributive aspect, by saying it's only about environmentalism. That's not doing us any favors. It's a serious weakness in the discussion, particularly in this country. It's obviously very ambiguous. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But I want to approach this as an engineer. So let me ask the next questions and then roll it out as to why it's so difficult, particularly for engineers. There's a serious problem when you talk to people about sustainability. To tell a story on myself, I used to work for AT&T. I was in charge of their design for environment effort. We got a crew together at one point, and we went in to talk to some people at Bell Labs about developing a sustainable telephone. They were excited. They were always excited at Bell Labs. I suspect stimulants. And so we all started jumping up and down and talking about how wonderful a sustainable telephone was going to be. And then they asked me what I meant. And the conversation went downhill very quickly. And it went downhill partially for this reason. What is to be sustained? The earth? No, that's the language we use, but the earth is not in peril. It's going to go rolling on regardless of what we do. It may look a little different. Life may be a little different in structure, but it's going to keep going. Biodiversity? Probably not. Most of biodiversity is microbes, and we can't even kill them in our hospitals where we're trying. Human life? Probably not. Humans are great generalists. If there is a crisis, generalist species tend to do very well. Existing economic and power structures? So are you telling me that we're doing sustainability to preserve existing power structures? Is that what it's all about? There's also a profound mismatch between the kinds of things that most engineers can do and the kinds of things we task them with. This is something I obviously didn't understand when I went in to talk to my folks at Bell Labs. They were designing a telephone. The telephone is already seriously constrained by the existing social, cultural, and technological systems around it. There were things that we could do and do better. And we did some of them. Reduce toxics, reduce packaging, you can go down the list, that sort of thing. But their ability to profoundly change patterns of human behavior was limited, to say the least. Now, if sustainability is only a matter of my getting better packaging on telephones coming out of AT&T, who's no longer in business the way they were, then we don't have a problem. We can take care of that. But if sustainability represents 7 billion people in the world refusing to understand the changes that they have already made and are continuing to make, then we have a serious problem. Because what we have done is we have turned sustainability into a dialogue that looks at the past rather than the future, and that is a serious problem. So what are some of the issues? Well, one of the biggest problems is that sustainability, because partially it comes out of environmentalism, is a discourse that does not pay a lot of attention to technology, and particularly to emerging technologies. If you talk to the biotech guys, the people that hide in the labs and only come out when it's dark at night, what they will tell you is they're working on technology that has a pretty good chance of extending human life to 150, perhaps even longer, in developed countries. Now, I want you to think about that. I was the president for a while of the International Society for Industrial Ecology. We had these big conferences around the world. These were people presenting the latest science on how to adapt to this, that, and the other. And the fact is that virtually everything I saw at those conferences would have been obsoleted by this single event. And this is not improbable. Most of the people working on this think that it is reasonably probable. Any prediction about future technology should be regarded as a scenario, not as a prediction. But you can associate probabilities with scenarios. This one doesn't seem to be that badly off. I was talking to the CEO of a company that has been founded to commercialize some of these technologies, and I said, a lot of people say that the first kids to live to 150 have already been born in this country. That's kind of bogus, isn't it? And he said, yeah, you shouldn't believe everything you hear. I think we can give them 200. How much of that are we picking up in our discussions? Zero. Zip. How much impact is that going to have on the assumptions that are implicit in the idea of sustainability? It has a huge impact on those assumptions. I'm glad we had somebody here from Microsoft. Most discussions of sustainability, you end up talking about things like energy and materials. Critical, important, no argument there. But think about what happens when you walk down one of the sidewalks at any college campus. You see people wired into alternate realities. They're on their skateboard and they're texting, for goodness sake. I would ask how many people here have almost been hit by people like that. The difference is huge, and we don't understand it, and it changes the cultural attitudes with which we approach these issues. So for example, what does unitary global memory out of Google mean? We used to think that memory was the sine qua non of human intelligence. That's because if you're in a pre-literate society, it clearly is, because how much you can remember is how much you can repeat of, say, Homer's poetry. Every kid in my class is an idiot savant. Why? Because they can open up their notebook and access Google. They have access to all the information on the net. That makes them far more brilliant than anybody in the history of the world. But they're idiot savants because they don't know what to do with it. Now, are we teaching them what to do with it? No. What does that tell you? Our education is obsolete as well. Right then. So what is sustainability? I think that sustainability can be thought of in some ways as a myth. And by this, of course, I don't mean it pejoratively. What I mean is, as an overall construct that we are trying to develop to enable us to grapple with the complexity of a world that we think is running away with us, but we don't really know what else to do with it. And I think it is valuable in that, and I think it is important in that. But I think if you understand it that way, you begin to understand why it is dangerous for engineers in particular to talk about how they're going to be doing sustainable engineering. And I should point out that I'm one of the PIs on a major grant doing sustainable engineering. So what is the problem for engineering? The problem is that sustainability offers very little guidance to the engineer as to what choices she or he should make. If I tell you, I want you to build a sustainable C-130, what the flip? That has no meaning. Now, if I tell you I want you to build a C-130 that uses less energy, that uses less toxics, we can roll through the list, then I can begin to do something. Okay. So the biggest problem, I think, is translating sustainability into design objectives and constraints. Now, you've got to remember that engineers are problem solvers. That's what you do when you're an engineer. You solve problems. That does not give you the same flexibility as being an advocate. And that's part of the problem. Where do we get many of our ideas about sustainability? We get them from advocacy groups that create sustainability that supports their particular position on issues. That does not mean they're wrong. But what it does mean is, if you're an engineer and you are trying to create objects for a society that is conflicted over many of those issues, you don't have the luxury of simply taking the position of a particular group. I was giving a speech in, actually it was in Pasadena, and it was on sustainable mobility, and there were like 500 or 600 people in the room, and everybody was in favor of sustainable mobility. That's why they were there. And I asked how many people there represented or were part of NASCAR. Now, this is a pretty auto-tuned audience at this point. None of them were. And that's precisely the point. We spend a lot of time talking to each other, but we already agree with each other. It's the people that don't agree with us that we ought to be talking to, and that we have to talk to as engineers. If I give you the Everglades and I tell you you're the guy that has to engineer the Everglades, you don't have the luxury of simply saying, well, the only thing that matters is a biota. Because then you're not going to craft a solution that works in the real world. You've got to solve a problem. That means you've got to include the developers, you've got to include people who disagree with you, you've got to include people who want to preserve the biota. And notice what happens when you do that. The biota become part of the design process. It is not external to your decision. It is part of what you are designing. This idea that you can get away by claiming you are not designing the world, that's over. Forget about it. That went up in 1945. When we tested the nuclear bomb, we took into our own hands the power to destroy the world as we know it. That's about the only technology I know of that can do it. It's still there. That's when we should have grown up. Okay, so general conclusions. Sustainability has not been well enough understood to provide very good guidance to engineering or to private industry. Sustainability in current usage is a highly subjective concept and represents only one of the worldviews that engineers and firms must integrate. Important, that does not mean that you can't do better. I think it's important to critique ourselves, and it's important to understand we haven't even started. And it's important to understand that we don't understand the technologies we've already unleashed, much less the ones that are coming down the pipe. But at the same time, we can do things a lot better. You don't believe it? Look at what happened with corn-based ethanol. I rest my case. Engineering must get far better at integrating social and environmental context. Engineering has got to change. For 20, 30 years, everybody's been saying engineering education has simply got to change. And the answer is, yeah, because now we can't afford to be producing engineers that are not also able to help the public, to help society understand the implications of the technologies they're creating. What if people do start to live to 150? Somebody had better start talking about the implications of that. Engineers must expand understanding of systems context, especially in role of products and innovation in creating service and social change. Yada, yada, yada. What does that mean? One of the things it means is, how many people here on Facebook? Facebook is 6 years old. Facebook has changed what social means. Nobody has a clue what it involves, but it's changed it. How many people here have been on a virtual reality, either World of Warcraft or EVE Online or Second Life? Oh, I'll bet it's more than that. You just don't want to admit it. Second Life. Do you know how many cross-dressers are on Second Life? Almost all of them male. You know why? Because if you're a woman, you can practice being a man and taking on some masculine characteristics in our society without getting hammered. But if you're a man and you take on any kind of female characteristic, you get hammered. So what do people find out? People find out, the CTO of Second Life was visiting us. We had a really good conversation about this, although neither one of us knew what the heck it meant. What they find out is that if people want to explore that aspect of themselves, they go to Second Life. So Second Life becomes a new avenue for exploring what it means to be human. Who knew? So what does all of this mean? I don't have a clue. But I do know that continuing to ignore the evolution of technology, the things that we have already created, the things we have already wrought, and pretending that we understand what sustainability means without a lot more serious effort is, if you'll pardon my French, bogus. And it's up to us, as engineers, as business people, as the ones that create the world that we're in now, it's up to us to accept the responsibility, because nobody else is going to do it for us. Not the advocates, not the, God help us, academics, It's up to us. Thank you.
Dr. Brad Allenby. Some very interesting things that have come out of this. I'm still looking for the sustainable telephone. Thank you. I was a little worried when he said, sustainable microphone. No. I was a little worried when he said the earth is going to keep rolling along, but life might be a little different. I was worried what that meant. And I am sure that when I started college, I was not an idiot savant because I could hardly use my slide rule back then. So anyway. Lots of great items for us to think about. What we're going to do now is bring the lights up, and we're going to go into a Q&A. And so we'll see if anybody has any questions out there in the audience for this distinguished panel. And we'll start. Do we have one? Questions to start with? Someone right here. Susan.
Dr. Allenby, the question you're asking with, or sharing the thought patterns of the convergence of technology and the human being, do you think there's going to be an evolution of the human being? I mean, we sort of already have with how we carry our cell phones, or as you said, disconnected with the technology. Do you see that evolution taking the next generation?
We can repeat some of the questions.
So the question was, are we moving towards more of an integration of the human and technology, if I can paraphrase it? I think we clearly are, and that it's accelerating beyond the ability of our psychology, our institutions, and our social frameworks to manage it. If you look at just some of the things that, for example, we're rolling out in Afghanistan and DARPA is looking at to support some of the activities there, we're talking about a telepathic helmet. We already have experiments at Carnegie Mellon that show that people can pull nouns from the electrical patterns in your brain without invasive surgery. Those kinds of things are being put together with other data from Japan and elsewhere. And this is all the public stuff. This isn't private stuff, the spook stuff. And what's happening is they've got a large grant out now looking at building a telepathic helmet. Now think about what it means if that helmet gets built. Two ideas off the top. The first is all of us tend to have three spaces. One is our public space, the way that you appear now to people around you, you've chosen your clothes, etc. The other is the private space, which is the way you appear to people very close to you. And the third is your inner space, where you think all those thoughts you think nobody's ever going to find out because they think you're going to jail. Now, what this technology does is it breaks down that barrier completely. What it means if I can build a telepathic helmet is that I can read your thoughts from a distance. And if I can do that, your thoughts are no longer your thoughts. Your thoughts are no longer private. This is way beyond anything the Soviet Union did. And it is being implemented in an environment where the security issues and the military issues to develop it are extremely powerful. So I think we're definitely looking at a redefinition of the human. One of the things you'll notice is as we project forward, people tend to assume that the human is a stable platform, that we remain physically close to what we are, that we remain mentally close to what we are. That is a very poor assumption at this point in our time. That's a very good question.
Let's go ahead to a second question. And while somebody raised their hand, we'll have the microphone brought over. And while we're doing that, I will ask the second question of Nancy and Matt. One of the things that we've seen in California is that California takes on the greenhouse gas challenge. And none of the states around us are taking that challenge. So we're spending all this money to get efficiencies, economies, renewables on a gas issue that affects the world. But we're paying and not getting all the benefits. What is your thinking about that, and can we afford to do this if nobody else plays?
Well, I think that's, first of all, it's a good question, and it's one that we grapple with all the time. And I think the answer is that there are costs to leadership. And we have seen that while the rest of the country and indeed the world aren't moving as fast as we would like, we are having an influence. And so I think it's got to start somewhere. And California seems to be, in some areas, and certainly in some of these energy areas, does seem to be the leader. It's part of our culture, I think, to be a leader on these issues. And there's no doubt in my mind that some of the work that California has done on energy efficiency and renewables, and indeed on global warming, are absolutely influencing what's happening in Washington. The renewable energy portfolio standard that's in at least the House bill and in most of the Senate bills is based on the California renewable portfolio standard. The work that's being done on energy efficiency and all the bills that are being considered by the Congress all incorporate what California has done on energy efficiency. So I think we are having an impact, and I think that the key for California is going to be that in the ultimate policies that are adopted by our federal government on climate change, that California is not penalized because we've done things early. And that's actually a really key point of debate. And so far, California, I think, has been fairly influential in making sure that early actions that have been to the benefit of the greenhouse gas debate, like having the lowest carbon emissions in terms of energy. Most, PG&E has over 50% of our energy portfolio is carbon-free. There aren't a lot of utilities in the country that can claim that, and so PG&E in California are working very hard to make sure that we're not penalized in the federal debate.
Matt, any thoughts?
Sure. So actually, I'm going to take a little different tact on this, because I think in the United States we can control some of this. I do believe that California will tend to lead, but I also believe that we're investing enough, through the federal government, that things are going to follow. My bigger concern is when we look at foreign countries. We look at countries that are emerging. The benefit for them to, kind of take the environmental sustainability seriously, control emissions, reduce their energy consumption, has to outweigh the cost to them in their economy. So if you look at companies emerging, you look at the power of China in manufacturing, you look at the parallels that I was describing with India. You have 2 billion plus people that aren't following what others are. That's where I think you draw those problems. So it has to be adopted worldwide in order to really have an impact. That being said, it's got to start someplace, right? There's an adoption curve for anything like this, whether it's technology or whether it's the people, process, and technology to do environmental sustainability. And I think we know that the sooner we react, or we hope that the sooner we react, the better we're going to be.
Okay. All right, we had a question over here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my question to the panel is regarding distributed generation of energy. Why has there not been more of an emphasis towards, or even just the idea put forward to the general public of distributed energy, so that the energy producers, the utilities, can be more energy brokers, and that way everybody can have a part of the responsibility, taking the responsibility for their consumption by helping to produce and to put back into the grid and to store the energy that they're consuming.
Good. I think it's a good question, and I think you're seeing out into the future a little bit. And I think we are taking steps to see more evolution and more distribution of distributed generation, so to speak. California pioneered the California Solar Initiative that's going to see 1 million solar roofs in California, funded by mostly the investor-owned utilities. So I think we are going to see that. I think one of the things that we are all in the energy business are grappling with is a balance between seeing more distributed generation and trying to figure out how the implications of that, because it's not quite as simple as, well, if everybody has their own source of power, it will all work out. Because the way that our whole energy sector is funded is that even people is that we still need to make sure that there's a supply of energy for people. We actually have a legal obligation to make sure that everybody who wants to turn their lights on can turn their lights on. And so we have, I think, some policy issues to be able to work out, but I think the path is being forged, and I think we're seeing lots more distributed generation now, and we're going to see a lot more in the future.
Matt or Brad? Go ahead.
So I think it's going to happen. I'm in agreement. I think we're behind, a little bit behind where we're going to start seeing that. I think you may start seeing other things advance quicker. I think you may start seeing areas or cities or individuals who are kind of generating their own energy, and when they don't have, or when they have excess, kind of to the vision that Nancy put out, that can be put back into the system and put back in the grid. So the idea of increasing the supply of energy, which will then decrease the costs. Right? The demand is already there. So if you think of it in economic terms, financially, is it beneficial to share energy? Right? Is it beneficial financially to do that? Well, if you have high demand and you can have higher supply and you can share that energy in places that need it, you'll drive down the cost of energy. So it's beneficial to consumers. What we have to do is we have to make it, something that's beneficial and rewarded for the electrical utility companies, as well as supported by the government processes we put in place. But I do think it's going to happen. It just needs to come to that crossroads where someone makes a decision and we start taking action to do it.
And I think I'll add a little bit of the hard economics to this too. When you take a look at today's generation from conventional natural gas facilities, you could probably produce power at about $70 to $80 per megawatt hour from natural gas. If you go to a very large solar array, one out in the desert, you get all the economics, you might be able to do it for $120 to $140 a megawatt hour. If you do it on a commercial building, it might be $225 a megawatt hour. And if you go to your home, it will be over $300 a megawatt hour to put that small photovoltaic on your roof with all the installation, all the hookup. So the question becomes, how do we bring those costs down? And ultimately, people are going to find a way to do that. And I think a lot of people are going to say there's value in getting rid of carbon. There's a lot of other benefits to this, and we should be thinking of this societally overall. And as we get farther and farther along, we'll see a faster conversion into that.
I'd like to add to that too. It's the same. It's kind of what I was talking about before. It's that technology adoption curve. Just like PCs, when you first looked at the PCs 10 years ago, you might have paid $10,000 to get a system, right? A really nice high-end system that you can use. Well, you look at today and you have a netbook, or my cell phone, which is much more powerful than my computer I had 5 years ago, right? So those costs, when you start building those components, you start making them easy manufactured, and you start getting it out there, they're going to reduce the costs, and those components are going to become available. So I just think it's a matter of time.
Okay, we have another question back here.
I just have a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to one thing that you just mentioned about price of energy relating, like a solar array on an industrial building versus a household. Does that include the amount of efficiency that would be gained in transmission? I mean, you lose a lot of efficiency having to transmit the power from a central source to however far away the power to somebody's systems in their houses or industrial building. And another thing, I guess another part of this question is directed to Nancy. You mentioned efficiency in general in California has been improving, and I just was wondering specifically how, like what types of things in the infrastructure have been done to improve efficiency overall in the whole system.
Well, let me start on the first one. I have the same knee-jerk reaction you do, because I think when we start looking at individual production costs, you really need to think of this more globally in terms of all the elements that come into play, which is why we don't need just engineers, we need economists, we need the business people, we need the human impacts, we need all of those things to be brought into the equation. But from a transmission standpoint, we have a pretty efficient transmission system. You might lose 1 or at most 2% per 100 miles of the bulk power transmission system. So you can go long, long distances pretty efficiently on these high voltage transmission lines. When you get closer though into town, you might lose another 4 to 5% in terms of the distribution system. So altogether you can lose 5 to 7% in that area for distribution and transmission. Nancy?
I think on the energy efficiency question, a couple of things. One, California and California ratepayers actually invest a lot of money in trying to make energy efficiency happen by funding those rebates that we all get if we install an energy efficient washer, dryer, refrigerator, by trying to change behavior. And so, first of all, I think we've seen energy usage go down because of behavioral changes, and they've been largely coming about because of financial incentives through rebates. The other thing, and education, of course. The other thing that California has really done is really influenced through having standards for appliances. So now refrigerators are not built the way they were built 25 years ago and being real energy suckers. They are much more energy efficient because we've got appliance standards. And we've really been kind of working our way around homes and businesses and working to get governmental standards for all kinds of appliances. You might have read recently that there's a little conflict brewing because our latest thing that we're trying to take on are energy efficient standards for televisions. And some people don't want there to be standards for televisions, but that's the next frontier in terms of appliance standards.
And then you'll notice that the term energy sucker is a real technical term. So
Again,
keep that in mind.
Again, the non-engineer understands.
All right, I have a question for Dr. Allenby before we go back to the audience. Brad, you've been around thinking about sustainability for a long time, and I would be interested in who do you listen to and why in thinking about this?
I don't listen to anybody. And the reason is that there are a lot of people that have good things to say, and you try to pick those out, but pro and con, this is an area with so much ideological baggage that unless you try to think it through for yourself, you're drinking somebody's Kool-Aid. It may be the right, it may be the left, it may be a Martian, but you're drinking somebody's Kool-Aid. I think the worst thing about the world right now is that most of what we have been taught is increasingly dysfunctional. And if you don't challenge the belief systems around you, regardless of how nice they are, I mean, we all like some belief systems, I think you make a bad mistake, because I think you fail to grapple with the real complexity and the really dangerous and awesome beauty of the world that's around you. So I listen to everybody, but I don't believe anybody, including myself.
Okay, another question from the audience, right over here. Yes, right down the front there.
One of the major problems with power has been storage, and I just wanted to see that what has been done in this regard, and this is an ongoing problem with the storage. Another thing is that Nancy talked about some of the social behavior or changes in social behavior. What kind of educational program needed for this change of social behavior or green social behavior?
Well, your question about storage is terrific, and if we're slow on distributed generation, we're not moving really on storage, and it is going to be a very important thing. And I don't know, Brad, that's one of those technological breakthroughs that we don't know what's going to happen, but we know we need it. I think. I don't know if you would agree with that, but it's something that there are a lot of people trying to think about it. There's certainly work being done on it, not enough. The federal stimulus package is investing some research dollars into storage research because it's important, but we're way behind the 8 ball on that issue. And on the education issue, I don't know, I think everybody may have a point of view on that, but and maybe I'll actually defer because I talked a lot about storage on the education issue, because that's another good question.
Go on education.
Go for it.
So I think your question raises 2 points at least. One is how do we socially engineer our society to behave in ways that we want it? And then the second is what gives us the right to do that? And the first, I remember having a discussion with some of the people at ASU on some issues involving climate change and the School of Sustainability and whether they were going to teach people what to think or how to think. And they're all good enough to know when somebody's setting a trap for them. So they all say, well, we want to teach them how to think. But then you look at what they're teaching, and they're teaching them what to think. So they're trying to do social engineering, albeit not very effectively. I think it's a very difficult question. And it is a serious question in a lot of ways. For example, there is an argument, and I present this only because I'm from Arizona and everybody knows we have a lot of reactionaries. There is an argument that the climate change community is trying to socially engineer American consumers because American consumption levels are viewed as evil. And some of my students think that that's what's going on and react very strongly against it. So I think that the education, the right way to educate people in this area is extremely difficult. The way I approach it is I try to move my students away from answers that they think they know, which in many cases are based on fairly naive views of economic, physical structures, global trade systems, and more towards questioning what they think they know. Because if the world changes as rapidly as it might, most of what we teach, regardless of how well-intentioned, is going to be obsolete. And if that's the case, the students that we have taught to wander in a rapidly changing world are going to do a lot better than the ones that we've taught our ideas to.
Okay, we have room for one more question, and while we're getting the microphone over, on the storage issue, I think a lot of people in the technological area are really now understanding that if we don't get low-cost storage, we will never get the benefits of distributed generation, we'll never get the benefits of electric vehicles, and we'll never get the full benefits of the smart grid. So there needs to be a lot of work done there. So we have one last question.
On the related issue on education, I think everybody rightfully emphasized the importance of education at all levels, not only at universities and schools, to public and decision makers. I would like to get the thoughts from the panel on how universities, specifically in terms of general education, can play a role on that, and specifically on state universities, which our general education is dictated by, basically by, or determined by legislators, or the board that are influenced by the legislators. What are your thoughts on that in terms of changing not only the education in the sustainability, but also cultural change and the view on that?
So I'd like to address part of that. One is, I think the universities, as you come into school, you're not there to really, have everything taught to you. You're there to learn, right? You're there to figure out problems on your own. So I think what needs to happen with education, this is just my experiences. I was a professor at DePaul University as well as Illinois State University before this job. And I believe that you need to put out questions. And we need to have people try and solve those problems. But what happens is you put out the question, and then they ask more questions, because now they're uncovering what's really happening. And those more questions lead to more questions. But eventually you're going to break that down into components and you're going to come up with solutions. We look at things like, high capacity data centers. Right? There was a problem there. Why would we have a high capacity data center? Well, we have 1.5 billion people that need to access Bing for search. And we have 1.5 billion people that need to come to Microsoft.com. So the prior data centers didn't work. So there's the problem, right? Just like energy, if we say we have a problem with energy consumption, there's either too much consumption, inefficient consumption, or too much waste generated. Right? That's the problem. But what's the root cause of that problem? And then after we discover or many root causes, how do we educate people to allow them to find solutions for that? That's why I love the university systems, because you have the chance to research, you have the chance to develop. And it always scares me when someone says, you kind of legislated what to teach in a way, because it's just not the way it should work. But I know that's how grants and things are funded.
Nancy?
I completely agree with Matt. I think that that universities in particular are sort of the question laboratories, and when you have teachers like professors like Brad, you must have that, because just listening to him in this short classroom that we've been privileged to hear, I think you get a sense of his students come out of the classroom questioning. But I wanted to mention that in terms of education, I think that that really, when you're talking about the kinds of issues that we're talking about, looking at things like the challenge of climate change, education is for everybody, and it's not just on the university campus. It's got to be everywhere. At PG&E, the way that we came to our position on climate change was through an educational questioning process. Well, I came from having worked for Vice President Gore, and so I saw the slides before they were a movie, so I had a point of view on climate change. But not everybody in my company did. And I certainly wasn't going to go into my company and be able to convince them just by the force of my personality. We, led by our CEO, had days-long seminars with university professors and leading experts in the field where we sat and listened to people on all sides of the issue of climate change, questioned, and then spent another couple of days debating as a management team what we heard, really seriously trying to probe what we heard, and that's how we came to our position, based on really the science as we probed it with experts. And so I think as we look at these issues, education, probing, and questioning have got to be at the root of how we get to the solution. And so I think, thank you for asking the question.
We'll close with Dr. Allen.
Yeah. So I walk into class and my students open up their notebooks. Some professors ban the computers.
I don't like those professors.
I don't and they go to Google. And I know some of them do because every time I get a fact going, they tell me. But there's the point, is it not? That notebook sitting on that desk obsoletes most of what we think passes for education. Our education is fact-based. That educational system is obsolete. It is obsolete. Google has made it obsolete, and yet we continue to do it. The system is far more broken than we think it is. I think it's something that needs to be approached with care because it still works by and large, but I think that's social inertia. And what really worries me is when the development of things like Microsoft and Google get fast enough, that social inertia is going to disconnect us from what's actually happening. Look at the kids these days. You take an fMRI of a student in one of my classes, and it is different than mine because he or she has been exposed to information networks in ways that I will never be exposed. It's different. They're a different varietal. That's pretty profound. So I think our educational system is broken. I get a lot of feedback on that position from the people inside.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Allenby. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to turn the program back to Dean Gulshani, and as he's coming up here, let's give our great panel a terrific hand.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you will agree with me. Wonderful session. I'm certainly better educated, inspired, and challenged. And I hope these thought-provoking ideas will stay with us and you will ponder upon it and keep it at the front burner, because we're all in it together and we've got to address that. So I would like to extend my gratitude to the members of the panel And there is a little memento that the college has prepared. Michael, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. We're coming to the end of today's event. One request to all of you. We will continue this lecture series and we will be looking for ideas, both for topics for future events as well as speakers. So don't hesitate to make suggestions. Once again, let's give a round of applause to the panelists.